Welcome to NTD News Today. I'm Kevin Hogan. Let's take a look at our top stories. Former President Trump has been indicted. It's a first for the U.S. as no sitting or former president has ever been criminally charged. We bring you analysis on this historic moment. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is under the microscope. Some are calling out his connection to billionaire George Soros. Lawmakers are criticizing military leaders for drag shows happening on bases, some even hosted for kids. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is reportedly dismantling its DEI unit. With yet another train derailment happening yesterday in Minnesota, a bipartisan group of representatives is calling for the passage of new safety rules. A historic moment for America. For the first time, a former president is facing criminal charges. A Manhattan grand jury indicted Trump, although the indictment remains sealed. Joining us live to break down the legal case, we have Paul Kamenar, lead counsel at the National Legal and Policy Center. Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
We hear a lot about this hush money that former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen paid to Stormy Daniels, but the legal details are a bit more obscure. What's the actual crime that DA Bragg alleges in this case?
Well, yeah, the question is whether this is a crime at all. First of all, having a non-disclosure agreement with Stormy Daniels is perfectly legal. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So what the prosecutor is doing is trying to figure out whether or not it was reported properly on the business ledger for the company is reported as legal expenses. And Alvin Bragg, the prosecutor, is saying, no, that's a wrong entry. And that's a nothing burger. That's a misdemeanor. 2-year statute of limitations that ran out. So what's Bragg going to do? He's going to try to bootstrap that. And apparently he did by alleging that this false entry, business entry, was in furtherance of a bigger crime, a felony of a campaign contribution to Donald Trump's campaign. Well, first of all, Bragg does not have any authority over federal campaign issues. Both the Federal Election Commission and the Department of Justice took a pass on that, and rightly so, because some years ago in 2011, the Justice Department prosecuted former Democratic Senator John Edwards, who was then running against Obama, for getting $900,000 to pay his mistress and his love child. The jury in that case acquitted John Edwards on one charge. They hung on other charges. The Justice Department did retry. They said, look, that's kind of a stupid theory of the case, and they did not retry him. It was wrong then to prosecute John Edwards, and it's wrong now to go after Donald Trump. And it's clear that this is a political prosecution. Alvin Bragg, who was backed by George Soros, ran on the platform of getting Trump. And this sort of is reminiscent of Joseph Stalin's Soviet secret police chief, whose motto was, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. Well, that happens in the Soviet Union. It should not be happening here in a democracy in the United States. So this is purely a political witch hunt, and hopefully the court will dismiss the case.
A witch hunt, that's an opinion that Trump himself shares. And of course, the legality of this agreement is central. Federal prosecutors previously dropped the case. What are the flaws you see in this case, and has anything changed now?
Yeah, the flaws are clear. First of all, there's a statute of limitations problem. It's 2 years for a misdemeanor, false report records. It's 5 years for the felony. This all happened in 2016. The time has passed, but they may try to find a loophole in that. So there's been a flaw there. The other flaw is, again, that this alleged campaign contribution is not a local offense. It's a federal offense at best, but the Federal Election Commission and the Justice Department, like I said, took a pass on it. So I don't see how this is going to survive motions to dismiss. And it's unfortunate that they're using this case to go after Donald Trump for one reason and one reason only, because he's running for the presidency of the Republican Party. They could have prosecuted him before he announced. Let's assume he didn't run for the president, said, look, I'm not running in 2024. Would they still bring this case? Absolutely not. So it's clear that this is a political witch hunt, like Donald Trump said. And in legal terms, that's called selective prosecution or malicious prosecution. And it should be dismissed on those grounds alone.
The statute of limitations is, of course, a big concern here, and, of course, President Trump's bid for president. Paul Kamenar, lead counsel at the National Legal and Policy Center, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
Trump's adult son, Donald Trump Jr., also weighed in. He compared the prosecution to communist-level behavior. Here's his statement.
This is stuff that would make Mao, Stalin, Pol Pot, it would make them blush. It's so flagrant, it's so crazed, when even like the radical leftists of the Washington Post are out there saying, it's not really based on facts, it's not really based on the law, it's not really based in reality, but it's 100% based on politics. When your enemies are saying that, it's got to tell you everything you need to know right now about where we are as a country.
Trump Jr. called the indictment, quote, weaponizing the government to target political enemies. The former president himself has said he was completely innocent and accused the district attorney of trying to hurt his chances in the 2024 presidential election. One of Trump's attorneys, Timothy Paolatorre, says it may be political. He explains that elected district attorneys on both sides of the aisle often do what they think will get them reelected. Here's what he says about the case.
Well, it was kind of a surprise, obviously, the timing of it. But, you know, the New York County District Attorney, it's an office that I've gone against many times. I served my career in New York City, and they have often brought, in my experience, cases that they really shouldn't. I've seen them indict many cases that I am later, taking into dismissals or acquittals because they don't really instruct the jury on what the law was. And so even if you have a situation where the facts aren't in dispute, the judge isn't in the room. And the prosecutors who want the indictment are the ones telling the jurors, hey, by the way, this is the law as we interpret it. But if that's not what the law actually is, that indictment gets dismissed.
Trump's defense team will be given a physical copy of the indictment during his arraignment. He will then be released. New York law bars prosecutors from seeking bail for nonviolent felony charges. And the New York City Police Department is already on high alert. The NYPD ordered all officers to show up in uniform today. A police spokesperson says the department wants to be prepared for anything. Barricades were put up around the Manhattan criminal courthouse last week when Trump asked people to protest if he was arrested. With former President Donald Trump indicted, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg and his ties to billionaire George Soros are in the spotlight. NTD's Daniel Monahan brings us the details.
George Soros gave $1 million to the left-wing Color of Change PAC in 2021. Epoch Times reports that it was the largest contribution by Soros during that year's election cycle. The group then spent significant money supporting Bragg's candidacy for district attorney. Color of Change describes itself as a racial justice group. It has frequently called for the defunding of police departments across the U.S. New York campaign finance records also show that Soros' son, Jonathan Soros, and Jonathan's wife, Jennifer, donated directly to Bragg's campaign. Criminal justice expert Sean Kennedy says George Soros has taken an active interest in numerous DA races in recent years, spending millions of dollars, and has provided financial backing to dozens of far-left DA candidates. Such DAs have been called D-prosecutors or Soros prosecutors. They started to enter the scene around 2014 and quickly became a major power block. They control at least 75 DA offices with jurisdiction over 1 in every 5 Americans. That includes half of the country's 50 most populous cities. Kennedy says such prosecutors believe the criminal justice system is racially biased and irredeemable, so they aim to undermine it from the inside. Former federal prosecutor Zach Smith says the Soros prosecutor movement traces its roots to the Marxist prison abolition movement. Members criticize mass incarceration and too many arrests, and aim to lower prison populations. The strategy they employ is to decriminalize many things, but not through changing laws. Smith says like-minded DAs simply stop prosecuting some crimes, and criminals aren't held accountable. DAs establish policies not to prosecute entire segments of crimes, for example, theft under a certain threshold and nonviolent offenses more broadly. They also undercharge crimes to avoid mandatory minimum sentences. Fox News reports other controversial DAs Soros has supported include Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, Kim Foxx in Chicago, Kim Gardner in St. Louis, and George Gaskin in Los Angeles. A report from The Hill says George Soros has denied contributing any money to Alvin Bragg's campaign and says he does not know him. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
While Republicans are pushing back against former President Trump's indictment, top Democrats are mostly keeping mum. President Biden had little to say when reporters asked him multiple times.
Your reaction to President Trump's indictment? Are you worried this will further divide our country, the indictment? I have no comment on that.
Mr. President. Possible protests in the wake of the indictment?
No, I'm not going to talk about Trump's indictment.
White House officials have repeatedly declined to comment on the matter over the past several weeks. Some top Democrats, including Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, have also remained relatively reserved about the case. And neither the Justice Department nor the Attorney General have commented on the indictment. In other news, top-ranking military leaders being confronted about drag shows on military bases. Officials say they didn't know such shows were happening. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is reportedly dissolving its Diversity, Equity, Inclusion unit after alleged racism against white people.
At a budget hearing on Thursday, Congressman Matt Gaetz confronted Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin about drag shows taking place on military bases. Austin said the military doesn't support or fund drag shows.
Why are they happening on military bases? I just showed you the evidence. Why are they happening?
I will say again, this is not something that we support or fund.
Well, so you think hosting a drag queen story hour on a military base isn't supporting the drag queen story hour?
I stand by what I just said.
But you may stand by it, but it's belied by the evidence over and over again.
Gaetz also addressed a tweet by Calissa Wing. At the time of the tweet, Wing was leading the military's DEI unit, which stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. In the tweet, Wing says she's, quote, so exhausted at the white folks in these PD sessions. This lady actually had the caudacity to say black people can be racist too. I had to stop the session and give the Karen the business. This tweet sparked a months-long investigation into the DEI unit. On Friday, Fox News reported that the military is now dispersing the department. A Pentagon spokesperson told Fox that after closing the unit, personnel were reconfigured within the headquarters staff to integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion expertise into key areas to continue addressing barriers to inclusion, closing gaps in representation, and incorporate the institutional insights we have gained over the past 2 years. After the tweet, Wing was placed on a 6-month leave, but wasn't fired.
Should she be fired?
That's a DOD employee, not U.S. military uniform.
Should they be fired, Secretary Austin?
Again, as you heard in your subcommittee here, this incident was investigated, and
they're still employed.
It was previously reported that no disciplinary action will be taken against Wing because she was speaking in a personal capacity.
Lawmakers are fired up about train safety, this in the wake of yet another major derailment on Thursday, this time in Minnesota, with a train carrying flammable ethanol. Members of Congress met yesterday to call for the passage of the Rail Act. NTD's Daniel Monahan has the details.
Representative Bill Johnson says rail safety is crucial. Johnson says Congress has the chance to take several steps right away to keep communities safe.
The Rail Act makes important and pragmatic changes to the way our nation's rail industry operates.
While Congresswoman Amelia Sykes says railway workers deserve better working conditions.
Americans want safety and accountability. We cannot wait until another tragic, catastrophic derailment upends a community. We must act now. We must pass the Rail Act.
Representative Dave Joyce says the Rail Act will improve train inspection systems and increase penalties for violations.
There's no one town that's ever equipped for this type of disaster.
Meanwhile, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur says something is nagging her about the East Palestine disaster. She says it's not the first time that a train wheel bearing malfunctioned. Kaptur also called for getting Amtrak off freight lines and appealed for modernization.
One of our problems is Norfolk Southern and CSX, to be quite frank, have not been willing to sit down with us to talk about that future. What does it take to get them around a table?
While freshman Congressman Max Miller lauded the bipartisan spirit of the Rail Act cooperation.
Support for this bill from Republicans and Democrats alike is extremely encouraging and shows our shared commitment from across the political spectrum.
The derailment of the Minnesota train on Thursday involved 22 cars carrying mixed freight, including ethanol. 4 cars also caught fire. Train operator BNSF said groundwater was unaffected by the incident. The evacuation order has been lifted. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Coming up, allegations of unfair elections. A House committee investigates what went wrong in a Pennsylvania county. And some of Los Angeles' super rich rush to sell their multi-million-dollar properties. A new mansion tax goes into effect tomorrow. More in just a moment here on NTD News Today. House members are probing possible voter suppression in a Pennsylvania county. 1/3 of Luzerne County's polling stations reportedly ran out of ballot paper on Election Day. One congressman likened the situation to someone failing to bring the football to the Super Bowl or fuel to the Indianapolis 500. Witness James Walsh says 48 polling stations ran out of ballot paper. He added that all are located in traditionally Republican areas. Other problems included 900 duplicate mail-in ballots and 4,400 more voter signatures in the poll book than ballots counted. No single county official accepted the committee's invitation to come to Washington to testify. Their counsel advised against it. A mail-in ballot scheme and voter bribery. 3 political campaign workers from a city in central New Jersey have been indicted for involvement in such a scheme. Last October, Anna Camillo was taken into custody by law enforcement officials for allegedly meeting with and attempting to bribe an undercover detective who was pretending to be a voter. She's accused of offering $20 supermarket gift cards to voters in return for letting her complete their mail-in ballots. She was a campaign worker for Perth Amboy City Council candidate, but authorities have not revealed the candidate's identity. 2 other workers are accused of harassing conduct towards a witness who provided information about Camillo's involvement in the voter fraud. Florida lawmakers yesterday passed a bill allowing residents to carry concealed firearms in public without the need for a permit. The bill needs to be signed by Governor Ron DeSantis, who has already indicated his approval. The new law would scrap the current requirement for a permit, as well as additional background checks, licensing, and firearms training, which are currently required under Florida law. But the law would not apply to those who are banned from purchasing or carrying guns under other Florida laws. If the law passes, Florida will be the 26th state to implement the measures. Senator J.D. Vance is moving to make English the official language of the United States. The Republican from Ohio introduced the English Language Unity Act Thursday. If passed, it will add a universal English language standard to U.S. naturalization requirements. It will also require government functions to be conducted in English. In a press release, Vance said the overwhelming majority of Americans support his proposal. He says that English has been a cornerstone of American culture for over 250 years, and that it's time for Congress to finally codify its place into law. The legislation would not apply to communications necessary for national security, trade, tourism, or health and safety matters, among other things, nor would it impact census or criminal and victims' rights. According to Vance's press release, 31 out of 50 U.S. states have already made English their official language. Some of Los Angeles' top real estate agents say the super rich are racing to sell their multi-million-dollar properties. Why? To avoid a new tax that comes into effect on April 1st. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more.
Starting in April, LA's mansion tax means owners are taxed 4% when they sell properties worth $5 million or more. And LA properties worth $10 million or more are subject to a 5.5% tax. It doesn't apply to other cities in Los Angeles County. A real estate agent who's on a Netflix series says the tax is bad for business.
The markets are having a very difficult time. Real estate's having a very difficult time because of inflation and because of high interest rates. It's just the worst possible timing. It's really, really devastating for the community.
But in one of the priciest real estate markets in the country, $5 million properties don't necessarily mean mansions.
It's colloquially called a mansion tax, but it's really not, because it affects more commercial properties than it does residential properties. And it affects any residential property or commercial property over $5 million, not exactly a mansion in Los Angeles.
Across town in Beverly Hills, Billy Rose says some are taking extraordinary steps to sell. Rose is the co-founder and vice chairman of real estate firm The Agency.
Many properties have gone into escrow in the last couple weeks, and many closings are occurring in the last couple weeks. So, it definitely seems to have had a tangible impact.
He says some sellers have been offering cars and million-dollar commissions to sell properties as soon as possible.
I think effective. I've heard that in those cases there has been increased activity in terms of the number of viewings, perhaps even in the number of in offers, but I don't know that they necessarily directly led to a deal, but effective tools.
The new tax was approved in order to provide funding for the city's homelessness crisis. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
A group of bipartisan senators plans to tour parts of the Colorado River next week. The river supplies reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell with water. That water is used by residents and industries like agriculture. The problem is, levels in the lakes have also fallen so low, experts say states that pull from them need to cut up to 25% of their water usage. The Department of the Interior is threatening to intervene if the states can't negotiate a deal among themselves. And that's what this tour is all about. Senators from Colorado, Nevada, and Wyoming will make the trip and hope to figure out ways to work together. Things should improve this summer when near-record snowpack in the mountains melts and fills waterways, but it's not expected to make enough to make up for the years of drought. A skier saved a snowboarder's life in Washington state. The man was buried headfirst in the snow near a cluster of trees. The moment was captured by the skier's camera. Let's take a look. The incident happened at the Mount Baker ski area in early March, but the footage was only recently released. The video shows the skier finding the snowboarder buried headfirst next to a tree. He then proceeds to dig the snow out with his hands until he's able to see the snowboarder's face. Once he confirms that the man buried under the snow can breathe, he assembles an emergency shovel and continues to dig. The skier posted the video on social media as a warning. He included this message: "Tree wells are real. I'm thankful I knew just enough to scrape by and perform a successful rescue." The snowboarder expressed thanks. He said he became separated from his friends in the cluster of trees and couldn't reach his radio once he was stuck in the snow. And just ahead, a 900% jump. The U.S. border authorities say the number of Chinese illegal immigrants entering the U.S. has grown at an exponential rate. Dozens have died in India after the roof of a temple collapsed. We'll have the details and statements from officials when we return.
We're entering an unprecedented period of economic turmoil. The economy is unstable, our government is in shambles, and the global war on energy has created a domestic crisis. Americans need a way to protect their financial future. One way to ensure your wealth in retirement is by purchasing physical gold and silver. We can help. You can roll any part of your retirement account into a gold or silver IRA. Better yet, you can open a gold or silver IRA in 5 minutes or less using our online application. Preserving your family's financial legacy is a choice that's always available to you. And when you're ready, we're here to help. Call us and speak to one of our IRA professionals. Let's build your financial legacy together. GSI Exchange, wealth for generations to come.
The most clear explanation is what every NDE person says, which is you live on after this life. And it's a life that's more real even than this one.
Watch the full episode on NTD Television and Epoch TV this Saturday at 9 p.m.
Welcome back. A new report is warning that a Chinese hacking group that is likely state-sponsored is highly active. That's a group that has been previously linked to attacks on state government computers in the U.S. The report comes from Insect Group. It's the threat research division of a cybersecurity company called Recorded Future. The report refers to the hacking group as Red Gulf. Insect Group says it identified a cluster of domains and infrastructure highly likely used across multiple campaigns by Red Gulf over the past 2 years. The report says Red Gulf is focusing on a broad range of targets that may be of strategic interest to the Chinese regime. The cybersecurity firm says they believe the activity is likely for intelligence purposes rather than financial gain. U.S. border officials say they're seeing a new spike at the southern border. According to them, the number of Chinese nationals trying to illegally enter the country is skyrocketing. Here's NTD's Tiffany Meyer with China in Focus for more.
A surge of Chinese nationals jostling to enter America. U.S. border authorities noting a spike in Chinese migrants coming illegally into the U.S. via the southern border. That number jumping to 4,200 between October 2022 and February 2023, compared to under 2,000 in all of fiscal year 2022.
For some, it took longer. A few people from China say it took them 46 days. The Chinese nationals tell NTD they are fleeing the Chinese Communist Party's repressive ideology.
Faith, freedom, freedom of speech. We have no rights at all.
But that number could be even higher. Officials say the Rio Grande Valley sector is seeing an over 900% increase in Chinese nationals over the same time last year.
The CCP to people is a kind of cruelty.
She decided to come to America 3 years ago after the start of the pandemic. The lack of medical resources during the pandemic reminded her of when she was a victim of China's one-child policy 20 years ago.
I lost 2 of my babies. One was 8 months old and the other was 23 days old. No medicine.
At stake, thousands of dollars. Numerous reports noting Chinese nationals often paying between $15,000 up to a whopping $80,000 to get to the U.S. border. That's compared to the $7,000 to $10,000 Mexicans pay, according to the Washington Times database of smuggling cases at the southern border. As for policy, each side is blaming the other. Republicans note the Biden administration rolled back Trump-era border protections, while the administration blames Republicans for voting against immigration reform measures introduced on the Biden White House's first day.
At least 36 people were killed and 16 injured after the roof of a temple collapsed today in India. Here are the details.
The incident occurred in the central city of Indore after a concrete slab covering the roof of the stepwell gave way. It crushed the devotees who'd gathered to celebrate the Hindu festival of Ram Navami on Thursday, officials said. Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh State is Shivraj Singh Chauhan.
An investigation has been ordered into the accident, and a magistrate-level investigation will also take place, which will find out who is responsible. The police have also registered a case, and based on the investigation, action will be taken against the culprits. Our priority right now is to complete the rescue operation and find the one missing person. The injured are undergoing treatment in the hospital.
Chauhan told reporters that a slab covering the stepwell collapsed due to the crowd and, quote, extra load on it. Stepwells are a common feature across the country. They were built hundreds of years ago, and many of them are ornately decorated, with access to a body of water through stairs and niches. At least 75 army and rescue personnel worked through the day to remove debris, using ropes and ladders to pull out people who'd fallen into the well, local media reported. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed condolences and announced compensation for the dead and injured in the incident.
If you have any news tips or feedback for the show, don't hesitate to email us at news.today@ntd.com. Still to come, Finland is officially joining NATO after Turkey voted in favor, but Sweden's bid is still frozen. In France, police are taking heat for how they've dealt with protesters. Videos on social media appear to show questionable police interventions. More shortly here on NTD News Today. After almost a year-long effort, Finland will finally become the 31st member of NATO. The Turkish parliament has voted to approve its application.
All 30 NATO allies
have now ratified the accession protocol. Finland will formally join our alliance in the coming days.
Finland shares an 810-mile border with Russia. Finland and Sweden both sought to join NATO last May in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. They needed the support from all 30 members of the military alliance. Turkey's final approval came after months of delay. That's after Finland fulfilled its commitments to combat groups Turkey considers terrorists. Turkey is still blocking Sweden's application over similar concerns as the three countries signed an agreement on the issue last year. Finland's formal acceptance into NATO will come at the next summit in July. Keeping with NATO nations, the Danish army chief says his country has major shortcomings in its ability to defend territory and meet NATO commitments. Denmark scaled down its military capacity after the Cold War, but with the crisis in Ukraine, NATO has called for a spending rise back to 2% of GDP. Denmark says it aims to achieve this goal by 2030. That would be 3 years ahead of schedule. As part of its commitment to NATO, Denmark will build a heavy infantry brigade, but the project has run into delays. In January, the country donated 19 howitzer artillery systems to Ukraine. This has further hampered its own military buildup.
First of all, we need to get more robust. We need to fix all the things that we neglected throughout the years since the wall came down. For the time being, the biggest gap is personnel. So we need to make it attractive to stay on in the armed forces for a longer time.
Denmark
recently
held a major
military exercises with about 500 soldiers joining from 8 countries. The U.S.'s 56th Artillery Command led the exercise. The unit was formed to enhance firepower in Europe. And in neighboring Germany, a new military cooperation is taking shape. The country has integrated the 3rd and final Dutch Brigade into its army. Germany's defense minister says the move is a milestone in the two countries' cooperation. Citing Russia's aggression against Ukraine, he says the war calls for a focus on collective defense. His Dutch counterpart says the merging of the armed forces is unique in the continent, calling it an example within both NATO and the European Union. In France, bar associations and prosecutor unions have called out a disproportionate use of force by police in handling protests. Many videos on social media appear to show questionable police interventions that put peaceful protesters' safety at risk. NTD's France correspondent David Vives spoke with a lawyer who says police have been given too much leeway when dealing with protesters.
4 police cars set ablaze, 4,000 tear gas and sting grenades fired by police. When it comes to the violence that marred a protest on March 25th in a western French countryside town, the numbers speak for themselves. French Senator Thomas Dossus on Wednesday confronted the Interior Minister over the protest.
2 demonstrators are in a critical condition, whom we wish a recovery without lasting damage. 47 injured police officers, whom we also wish a speedy recovery. 200 injured, some of whom were seriously wounded. Unspeakable violence was unleashed, and we denounce it unambiguously. But that's your record, Minister.
Demonstrators in Sainte-Soline protested the creation of a large water reservoir for farm irrigation. Even after weeks of protest against the pension reform, the degree of violence was surprising. Authorities say police experienced an unprecedented explosion of violence as they were targeted with Molotov cocktails and fireworks. Police replied with rubber bullets. Some legal experts have called out a disproportionate use of force by police during recent protests.
We can see that in certain situations it's very clear that the police are charging at people who are not dangerous and who, at that moment, are going to be hit or possibly put in danger by grenades of this or that type. I underline that there are many reactions from legal professionals at the moment. There's even the Paris Bar Association or other local associations which have taken a position on what has occurred.
Some police tactics deemed illegal have also been reported, like surrounding small groups and keeping them from moving for hours, or confiscating protesters' safety equipment, such as glasses or body protections. There are also testimonials of people who got arrested when they simply walked along a protest march without joining in. Marion says these arbitrary arrests are a way to discourage people from protesting.
These arrests serve to dissuade people from demonstrating, that's for sure. It also makes it possible to put people on file, because once they've been arrested, we will be able to register them and put them on file in a lot of databases that the intelligence or other services will be able to access afterwards. And of course, it also allows us to strengthen the authority of the police.
She also says many police operations have been made possible after Macron's government changed the law following the Yellow Vest protest movement.
Since 2019, we have a law that is very problematic because it's very broad. It's a law that was passed, obviously, just after the Yellow Vest movement. We understand that the Macron government wanted to protect its police officers to some extent, and then they gave them the most freedom possible with regard to demonstrators.
David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
The country of Montenegro will hold a runoff presidential election over the weekend. A longtime incumbent faces a strong challenge from a Western-educated economist. 61-year-old Milo Đukanović has dominated Montenegro as president or prime minister for 33 years. Opponents have long accused the former communist and his party of running the small republic as their personal territory, allegations they deny. His rival in Sunday's second-round election is 37-year-old Jakov Milatović, a former economy minister and the deputy head of the Europe Now movement. He advocates for closer ties with both the European Union and Serbia. Đukanović wound up with a little over 35% of the vote in the first round on the election on March 19th. Milatović received almost 20%. A runoff election is necessary since neither gained a 50% majority. Thousands of Israelis took to the streets yesterday in support of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's judicial overhaul plan. They blocked a highway in Tel Aviv following months of upheaval over Netanyahu's decision. Drone footage shows crowds of people blocking the Ayalon freeway, which was the site of almost weekly closures by other protesters who see Netanyahu's plan as a threat to judicial independence. Netanyahu says reforms are needed to balance out branches of government. On Monday, he paused the overhaul to allow negotiations on a compromise, confronted by domestic unrest, as well as apprehension and reproach from Washington. President Biden has spoken out against the plan to overhaul Israel's judicial system. What exactly is at stake? NTD's senior Washington correspondent Kelly Wright speaks with a Netanyahu ally to break down the situation from his perspective.
How did the protests come about? Tens of millions of dollars were sent to Israel to fund and fuel those protests by leftist God haters. Now, why are they doing it? Okay, you say, well, they're doing it over judicial reforms. Well, what are the judicial reforms? The Supreme Court justices have the effective veto of an appointment of a new justice. In other words, imagine our Supreme Court justices appointing each other. That's exactly what's going on right now in Israel. Secondly, the Supreme Court can overturn any government policy or disqualify any civil appointment. Imagine that happening in the United States. Thirdly, the court can declare Israel's basic laws to be unconstitutional. And that's what they're doing right now. And fourthly, any ruling of the Attorney General is not binding on the government. That means an appointed civil servant, the Attorney General, is the boss of the Prime Minister. Never happened in the United States. Let me mention something else. In the United States, we only elect one president. In Israel, they elect coalitions. Imagine if we had 30 or 40 coalitions in America that have to be elected to form a government. You talk about chaos beyond your wildest imagination if it happened in the United States.
Evans also talked about Saudi Arabia's deal with China. To watch the full interview, please tune in to Capitol Report tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on NTD News. And just ahead, watchmaking startups focus on sustainability. They showcase their products at 2 trade fairs in Geneva. We'll take you there. Plants are making noises, but we can't hear them until now. Researchers have recorded distressed plants and then adjusted the pitch for our ears. Find out what the plants sound like when we return.
A performance that truly matters for each and every one of us. This is what you've been waiting for. See it at least once in your lifetime. Get tickets now at shenyun.com.
Miss NTD, the first NTD Global Chinese Beauty Pageant. Miss NTD, let's make history together.
Good to have you back with us. Watchmaking startups try novel approaches to create timepieces with a focus on sustainability. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more from 2 trade shows in Switzerland.
The Watches and Wonders trade show in Geneva is the largest of its kind. Here, sustainability is at the forefront for some innovative startups. Time Designers is presenting a prototype. This watch face is made of thin metal particles surrounded by black oil. Magnetic fields allow a bubble to move to indicate time.
All the materials we choose for the watch are either recycled or from a production system in which we have confidence. We want to be B Corp certified and Swiss made, but we also want to go beyond that.
Another watch fair taking place in Geneva is Time to Watches. The industry event is for middle to low-end watches.
There are brands that are much more recent. There are perhaps more startups, etc. But they really bring new concepts, new approaches. Big watchmaking houses with a great history might not be able to afford to break too many rules.
ID Geneva was founded with the environment in mind. Its latest model, the Circular S, retails for $4,800. The watch is made from 100% recycled steel using a solar foundry. Straps are made from green waste collected in London parks.
We use an ETA 2824 movement, which is the most widely used mechanism in the watch industry and in training. So any watchmaker who has done a little training has worked on this movement, so it's easily repairable. It's known by everyone, and so we use old stocks of these movements.
The watch's packaging is made from a compostable mushroom material. Even the core of the watch doesn't require new materials.
We buy old pieces. We have them refurbished, so they are like new, and then they work like new, with our own setting standards, our own operating criteria.
Both trade shows are open to the public the first weekend of April. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
The first new electrical tower design in almost a century, the UK is introducing a T-shaped pylon as part of its low-carbon energy push. The new structure is over 100 feet tall, about 1/3 lower than a traditional lattice tower. The T-shape is smaller and has only 10 parts, making it easier and faster to install. It also boasts a reduced electromagnetic radiation field. These pylons will support 35 miles of high-voltage power lines. They have the potential to link 6 million homes and businesses to new sources of low-carbon energy. That's an effort to meet the country's goal of net zero emissions by 2050.
First new design of pylon for National Grid within the last 100 years. So the pylon itself was selected from over 250 design ideas which were put forward in an international competition. They do look much nicer, they're sleeker, and really do signify the low carbon energy that will be transported along them. But when we've gone out and spoken to our local communities, the feedback has been the preference of T-pylons.
In southwest England, a French-Chinese joint nuclear power plant will begin generating electricity in 2027. Low-carbon energy will then flow through the upgraded power lines to the rest of the country. Plants in distress make noises. We just can't hear it, according to researchers in Israel. NTD's Andrew Thomas has more on the results of their 6-year study of plants, ranging from tomatoes to tobacco.
Researchers at Tel Aviv University have evidence that stressed plants make noises. That can be when they've been cut or when they're thirsty.
In both cases, they emit sounds. During dehydration, we see that if we stop watering the plant, it starts emitting a sound at about day 2, peaks.
The researchers used microphones to record healthy and stressed tomatoes, tobacco, and other plants.
We're recording sounds emitted by tomato plants, but these sounds are ultrasonic sounds, so we humans can't hear them. In order to show what these sounds are like, we took many sounds, we put them together in a small time frame, and we changed the frequency so human ears can hear them.
After recording the plants, a machine learning algorithm can even differentiate between unstressed plants, thirsty plants, and cut plants.
This is an example of such a manipulation we did on tomato sounds that we recorded.
We can't hear the plants, but some insects and mammals can.
It means that there are sounds out there in the air and they contain information. So organisms to whom these sounds may be relevant could have evolved to respond to the sounds.
Could these plants make noise to distract predators or attract pollinators?
There are several tomato bushes. Some of them are emitting sounds and others are not. Would it prefer the ones that emit sounds or the ones that do not? This is something we are looking at the moment.
More research could shed light on how and why plants use sound to interact with their environment. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
Coming up, people with disabilities have just as much to offer the community as others. A Philadelphia restaurant is trying to get that idea out to a wider audience. Details to come on NTD News Today. A restaurant in Southeast Philadelphia is redefining service to the community. Its owners look to empower each individual, including those with special needs and their families. Let's take a look.
Just as its name suggests, So Much to Give aims to show that people with disabilities have much to offer society.
Oh, I love it. It's just a meeting.
The atmosphere, the love that is shared through the people who are serving us and even the people who come here, it's just refreshing.
Not only staff and diners with special needs, the restaurant serves all other patrons seeking a heartwarming place to dine and socialize.
We have gotten very, very good Google reviews and other reviews on Facebook and everywhere that people come and they say, we'll be back. And that's the most important thing. They love the service and they love the food. But most importantly, they love the environment and they love the service they're getting from our employees.
The brand is the initiative of a nonprofit called Pillars of Light and Love. The group is dedicated to stress and life management for all ages. School teacher Maureen Stanko created the program for her autistic son.
I did this because my son is about to turn 21 and there really isn't anything for these young adults when they age out of the school system.
She shared how her son managed to set up chairs in the restaurant after 2 weeks of learning and improving.
It's empowering. It's empowering for our workers because him and the people who are employed here, because they start out and they just keep learning more and more and more and improving and becoming more independent. And what's really cool is that the customers are noticing this.
The employees have been enjoying the environment since it opened 2 months ago.
It's definitely my favorite job I've ever had. You get something new every day. I love the people I work with. I love the customers that come in and kind of match our energy, I guess. Everybody just has this very positive feeling coming in. You can feel a sense of love and just compassion, and that's honestly, I can't ask for anything more going to work every day.
Every other job that I've been to, they've been letting me go because of my disability, how I can't reach above my arm. So here, they don't judge.
It's great to see all the people working here, and I have a little 3-year-old daughter, and she comes in to eat a lot. She loves it here, too.
The founders are seeing their efforts spreading through the community.
Without the community, none of this would be happening, and they believed in our vision, and now our vision is unfolding into reality. It has unfolded, and it just keeps growing.
We would love to see more opportunities develop throughout the community. There are other wonderful organizations around, but we're here to also teach and educate the community, to let people know that those with disabilities can work and they can be very, very good employees.
The cafe is now raising funds for a wheelchair elevator to better accommodate its staff. NTD News, Philadelphia.
An Australian man recently found a 10-pound rock filled with gold. It's dubbed the Lucky Strike Nugget, and it's worth more than $160,000. A person who valued it says the nugget is, quote, a once-in-a-lifetime find. The amateur gold digger found the rock in the state of Victoria in an area known as the Golden Triangle. His name hasn't been released, but he used an $800 detector to find the valuable gem. In 2020, gold diggers in southern Australia found 2 huge nuggets worth $250,000. 3 years later, an amateur explorer found one worth at least $300,000. Astronomers have found what could be the largest black hole ever discovered, and they say it's big enough to fit 30 billion of our sun. The ultramassive black hole was discovered in a galaxy hundreds of millions of light years from Earth. Astronomers made the discovery when searching for a galaxy even farther away. James Nightingale is the lead author on the study of the new discovery and says this black hole is on the upper limit of how large we believe black holes can theoretically become. This black hole is part of the Abell 1201 galaxy cluster and was discovered using a new technique of detecting light bent via gravitational pull. The technique is called gravitational lensing and allows astronomers to detect less active or inactive black holes. And that's all for today's program. We're really glad to have you with us. Please send us an email if you'd like to tell us something. We're going to put it on screen. For podcasters, that's news.today@ntd.com. I'm Kevin Hogan, NTD News, New York City.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.